My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today we have all the way from New York City, Hari Mahesh, and he's the founder of Aram Bum, and please correct me again because I'm doing terrible
Okay,
English.
Arambum, yeah, Arambum,
Arambam, and
yeah,
it's a modern third space for next generation of Tamils and Southern South Asians. And he is also the director of the New York chapter of the Knowledge Society, TKS, which can best be described as an accelerator for unicorn teenagers. So, Ari, welcome to kind of the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
especially given today is kind of a big day for you guys in the US as well. I appreciate you guys. I mean, I know you've already done your vote, but still, still a big day. So thanks for connecting.
that's
Um, for me, I always like to kind of start at the beginning in terms of everyone's kind of story, and I think obviously, your childhood and formative teenage years kind of play a big part in that. So I'd love to hear about kind of how you grew up and maybe some definitive moments and kind of how you were from your childhood or formative teenage years.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to share more about that and kind of give it in the context of both of the big, I would say, ventures that I'm doing in terms of Arambum and TKS as well, and kind of what led to both of those, I would say. And it definitely, to your point, starts from my childhood and teenage years here in terms of experiences. But yeah, so born and raised here in America. I would say where I consider home is Seattle, Washington. That's where I spent most of my life in terms of childhood. I went to school there, elementary school and high school, or middle school as well. But I did spend time just throughout that all just kind of hopping around. My dad was working as a management consultant, so that implies that he was traveling for work all the time, and so that meant that we would travel with him, which was one of the great privileges of him traveling was that we get to vacation wherever he went, which was always fun. But that also was looked like I spent 5 years living in Australia. And so that was when I was just my understanding is right after I was born until I was about in first or second grade. And my understanding there is that my dad's like job took him there. We stayed there. They loved it, but they wanted to come back to America, which we did. And then we settled in Seattle, and then I've been there since. So that's kind of where my transition goes. And then after high school, pretty much hopped around the country. So Boston, SF, and then ended up in the greatest city, at least in America for sure, maybe in the world. I like to think I haven't been to all the cities in the world, but New York City. And so that's where I am right now. But yeah, man, I mean, in terms of like looking at childhood and formative years, I think taking the Arambam lens to it, right, is that grew up in a Tamil household that was super cultural, super Tamil oriented. Like we grew up listening to mostly Tamil music, and if not all Tamil music, maybe the Western songs that were thrown in there were either Michael Jackson, because my dad loved Michael Jackson, or reggae music there, because that was like a big influence for him. But it was a lot of Tamil music, of course, the classics like Raja, and then to the like kind of the modern classics of SPB, Harris, VJS, not VJS, so what am I thinking? Imuni Krishnan, right? And the people of that sorts that really defined, I would say, the 90s and the early 2000s there. And then, of course, so much culture in terms of Tamil movies, right? My dad's favorite actor and my favorite actor is Rajinikanth, and he definitely defined a lot of childhood, right? Like movies like Padiyappa and Basha and even Billa and even the OGs like Guru Sishin and stuff was always playing on repeat at my house. That's like the kind of the most like in terms of like media that I consume, core memories there. And those definitely define a lot of like how I experience culture, because one of the things, and we talked about this when we initially talked about it, is like growing up, there wasn't that much of like Tamil communities and culture like expressed in the outside, kind of outside of my house. And of course, what I include is, of course, family friends. We had a lot of Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam, Malu family friends where you do have that culture, but it's not like we could experience it outside, right? And we definitely didn't experience it in the media as we do today. And of course, we didn't have social media back then either. So that was like, I would say, the big piece of like movies and music. I also grew up Carnatic singing, which helped me like understand and appreciate music more. I didn't continue it, unfortunately, but I wish I did. So that's a bit of on that side of things. There. I mean, I would say like Rajnikant, and then to that point, it was also Ajit and Vikram were my favorite actors, kind of in the modern day. So they definitely defined a lot. Their movies were definitely formative for me. But then on the TKS side of things was that I grew up in Seattle, which meant that I was right in some sense, the heart of technology, especially since I grew up in this little city suburb of Seattle called Redmond, which is the headquarters of Microsoft, and we lived across the street from the Microsoft Redmond campus, which is their headquarters, right?
Wow. Okay.
And so that through school and other things was exposed to technology at a very young age, was exposed to technology through my dad at a very young age, right? Like he always was buying like cool new gadgets like tablet PCs and like touchscreen phones before iPhone was a thing, right? And that really exposed me to a lot about technology and really fell in love with it. And so that led to me then tinkering and building, wanting to build my own like software and technology. So I was like hacking iPhones and jailbreaking them and building like software ROMs to flash like Windows Phone and Windows mobile devices with Android. It was like such a niche thing to do when I was like in middle school, right? But learned how to code through that, started building apps, and built a few different apps throughout like the course of high school, I would say. Very, very just like games and like student planners and like very small stuff. And then started building more in like healthcare, which I really, really fell in love with there. And then that led me to this early part of like I know that you want to touch on that, or you probably want to touch on that afterwards, but that led me to effectively dropping out of high school to join as the youngest employee at J&J, which then sparked my, I would say, career in entrepreneurship and tech after that.
No, that's great. That's a great summary. I would say I think the a couple of things I want to kind of touch on. So obviously I can kind of see the connection between why you started at Rumbum and like because of the impact of culture that you saw through music and movies and things like that, and kind of how that made you kind of appreciate your culture and the fact that you're a Carnatic singer as well. So I can definitely see the connection there. This is more out of curiosity as a parent myself.
Yeah.
The fact that your dad moved around for management consulting, like his role, and you got to travel, I'm sure that sounded exciting. Were there, how did you kind of, as a child, remember the moving part? Was that something of like, hey, we get to experience these cool things, or did it kind of translate to like, oh, we didn't get to like establish roots in a certain place? Like, how did you um,
Yeah.
take that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's created me into who I am today, which is very much like I just travel a lot. I'm able to hop around. I'm able to, I think, make friends fast and try to get people like try to build communities and like friendships really fast, right? And kind of get people together because it's kind of that hopping around meant that like yes, I had friends and it's like yo, you have to make friends really fast and you got to meet people really fast, right? And kind of you have to put yourself out there. It's like if you're just staying one place, naturally you're going to just form friends just through frequency there. But if you don't have that like length of frequency that you can execute, you need to kind of do that faster, right? And so just to clarify on the moving piece, right? Like what Seattle was home base. So essentially like school and stuff, like I'd go in Seattle. Like me and my brother and my mom, we lived in Seattle. We had our home, right? And my dad would work, travel during the week for work. And so he'd go on Monday, I assume, and then come back Thursdays or Fridays, right? But then he'd be back on the weekends. And so that was there. But then the moving part was more like Seattle, again, would still stay as a home base. But then in the summers, I wouldn't have school and my brother wouldn't have school. So then we would just go to wherever my dad was. So then it was like summers, we'd be in multiple different cities, wherever he was working at that time, because he could just essentially take us with him and just have us there. Right. And so again, I think that like pushed me on the part of just also experiencing a lot of America and understanding. I mean, I think America is a country of countries, right? Like we say, the United States of America, each state, if you want to think of it as a country, right? It's all independent, but it's also there's like one big country that mandates us all, but everything has different cultures, different like ethnicity, like diversity, right? Ethnic diversity in terms of like not just people, but also the way the city is built, like more in the South, right? In California, it's a lot of Spanish and Latin influence versus more in the North, it's like more European, and the Northeast, it's more British. It's like just you just start to experience all of it, which is amazing.
So what was you said you kind of developed the skill of building relationships or friendships
Yeah.
relatively quickly or more than easier than like the average kid. So
Yeah.
what were some of the things that you did or you remember doing that kind of like was it innate or was it things that you kind of learned how to do?
So I would say my parents are just in general very outgoing individuals and just super sociable, in the sense that they were like they were usually always the hosts for things, right? Invited people over. They would also make friends really fast in different like cultural and community settings, and I saw that and I experienced that. And I would say like I definitely think like I learned a lot, right, through the process. So it's not all like innate as much as I saw what people did around me and my parents, especially because they're the people I'm most exposed to, of course. But I think it's a lot of like I found it around like kind of similarities, right? Either cultural or interests or personality interests and like similarities. And what I mean is like I grew up also, one thing I didn't mention that was a big part of my childhood was sports. I grew up playing soccer. That was my main sport, but I also grew up playing cricket, a little bit of basketball, and then honestly, like literally every other sport. Because also my dad was a pretty big athlete. He played cricket in like adult leagues here in America until I think he was in his well into his 40s here. So he played for a long time, definitely through we were growing up, and so he would play a lot of sports, and we got exposed to that. So then it's also this like when I'm playing sports with people, like camaraderie there. You're building that friendship, even if you're playing against each other. That's also fun, right? So it's like doing activities together, finding things of interest, finding like similarities was good. I remember like if I think about some of the friends I grew up, like that like I met through the travels that I'm still in touch with today, which many of them I am, and some of them are really close friends of mine still. Right? Like there was always like, oh, we remember there was this TV show that we bonded over, or this movie that we bonded over, or this like book that we all read together, or I mean, again, sports or video games or something that we all did that like brought connection there.
Interesting. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you kind of already mentioned it, and I was going to kind of go there, but dropping out of
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
and becoming, like you said, I guess the youngest employee in the healthcare technology division within Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah.
Um, Number one, how did your parents take that? And number two, um, did they? I mean, they seem like based on kind of parents that I know of, like other South Asian kids, they
Yeah.
seem already to begin with quote unquote cool in the sense that like, you know, um, not to say cool, more so like I guess open-minded. So
Yeah.
like were they open to this kind of idea of you like dropping out of school, which is very like a big no-no in our culture? And then like how did they feel after the 4 years and they kind of saw your progression and kind of what you were able to do at Johnson and Johnson?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were definitely, I think,
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
like of course I saw different sides of them, right, as a parent, but like I presume they were the cool parents is what my friends told me there, and they're definitely still like very different and cool and just like way more modern, which I think has been to my brother and I's benefit because they've let us kind of do what we want to do, which has been amazing, right? Like of course they have their notions of like, oh, like you should do this or you should do that. They do have that, and I think they do ask that, but I think it's a matter of like they also hear us out in terms of what we want to do and kind of give us the freedom to figure that out. And so I think there's definitely that element to it. The way this all came about, right? It was like a step by step, right? So it was my junior year. I through like a connection got connected with one of the VPs at this technology division who I met because I happened to be in New Jersey with my dad at that point. And he connected me with and he's like now like official like a mentor of mine, like a lifelong friend, just like somebody who supported me. But one of the managers that worked on the team that he was like, yo, this guy's like you should learn from him. Like maybe you should shadow him for the day. It was like meant to be an hour meeting, and then it turned into like me going to lunch with this other individual. His name is Greg. I don't want to give out his full name, but well, I went to lunch with Greg, right? And then Greg was like, yo, like cool stuff that you're doing. Why don't you like try these like I think it was like I forget exactly, right? At this point, it was like over 10 years ago, right? And it was like I was 16 at the time, right? Like it was like, hey, try these projects. And then it was just like, okay, cool, like love it. Let me and I just honestly I think I just kept coming in. He was like, yeah, why don't you come in tomorrow and do these projects with me? And I came back the next day. And then I just like stayed the whole week. And then I went back home, like back to Seattle, I think the following week, if I'm not mistaken. And then we still stayed in touch virtually and I was still working project. And he was like, yo, why don't you just like come back and like do the work? And I was like, sounds good. And so it like evolved, like just evolved into an internship for the summer. It was my junior to senior year summer. So I was technically a rising senior, right? And then at the end of that, I was essentially like, yo, I don't want to go back to school. And they were like, yeah, it would be great to have you. Right. I don't even think they knew what they were doing with me, right? It's like it's a high school kid who hasn't even finished high school, right? Like it's like, but it's like I was executing on projects and building apps and things for them and doing stuff that like not in like a not in a bad way, but it's like I was doing the stuff that a college graduate would have done, right? And I think like I look back on that, and it's like I appreciate them giving me the opportunity, and of course the coaching and mentorship because I didn't walk in with that skill. They like helped develop that, and like they put in the time, right? And this goes to everything I'm thinking about and wanting to do with TKS is because it's just a matter of learning. Like students and people learn what they want to learn, right? Or what is given to them. And it's like, it'll take time. It may take a little bit more time for different people, and that's okay. That's part of the process. But anybody can learn anything. It's just a matter of like putting yourself in those environments to learn and pushing yourself to learn. But yeah, I started learning that. And then it turned into, hey, like, let's like get this. Like, why don't you just stay here and work full time? Let's figure out something to do with your high school. I went back to my high school and was like, yo, I got this sick opportunity to do it. Like, let's figure out how to do it. And you'd expect, I mean, we would want them to embrace it, but of course, as any would normal school would, they were like, WTF is this, right? Kind of vibe. It's like, no, you have to come to school. It's like illegal to not go to school. You can't work, right? Because it's like they didn't want to deal with the legal processes or potential. And I was like, nah, like I was like, I'm not gonna stay, right? Like it's just like, why would I miss this opportunity? That like again, it's like the people I was kind of working with again were like people who had graduated college. So it logically didn't make sense to me. It's like, yo, like they want me to stay and do this work that like it's the same kind of job that I would have gotten. Let's say I stayed in the normal track of going to like high school and college, but I'm can do it now. Like then why do I have to spend the next 5 years just wasting my time when I can like do this now? Right. And that in my head, it like made sense to the 16-year-old head. Right. And it's like, I mean, it makes sense now too. That's like literally what we're doing through TKS in some regard. But point being, it was like I figured out a way to enroll to a local community college that would let me do virtual classes that I could then count for high school credit. Because my parents, the one restriction, my parents let me do all of this, but their one restriction is I still have to get the degree. Right. Like they still wanted me to get the degree. And I also, it's like, yo, I put in all this work. Like I should get the degree. Right. So I figured out a way to get the high school credits I needed to get and still and then it's like still legal because it's like now I'm enrolled in college and nobody can stop me about that. And then it's like cool for all intents and purposes I was virtually going to this college while living at home, but I was actually living in New Jersey working at J&J here. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I
And so my
mean,
parents were on board. It's just like, but it's also through that I got like effectively a part-time bachelor's program through my college and I got a bachelor's degree as well. Right. But again, it was like I was still working full time, but my parents wanted me to make sure I got my degrees there.
I think you make it sound like it's very straightforward, but I think the attitude or mentality you have around like just solving a problem without like I don't know how much direction you had, but I don't think a lot of kids your age would have kind of figured it out. Like usually you would kind of rely on somebody to kind of tell you step by step. And at least based on how you're telling the story, it's like you kind of said, "Hey, I want to do this. How do I do this so that my parents are happy, J&J, like they're okay with it, and like just in general, just like how do I make
Yeah,
this a win-win-win for everybody?"
yeah,
And that's pretty remarkable. And I do want to get to TKS because it's like the natural kind of
for sure.
segue, but
Yeah,
I do want to touch on like it's almost like a Cole's notes on the kind of your LinkedIn, but I thought it was, interesting or caught my eye.
yeah,
But you did a Kickstarter back in 2016. You
right.
raised 15K for a project called ZAVR Men. Number
Yeah.
one, like, what was this project about and what made you guys decide to do Kickstarter? I'm always fascinated when people do Kickstarters because I always find people that do Kickstarters are always up to interesting things or just interesting people. So I need to kind of get into this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the way the name is ZAVR, which is the word, it comes from the word for jewelry in Hindi, which is like it's ZAVR, but then we made it like cool and aesthetic, so it's spelled ZAVR, right? And men, and it was essentially what we created was men's jewelry, right? For like modern jewelry for men. And the premise there, again, I just have this like awesome fascination with like fashion because I have I would say like creative and design background. So this also stems from the tech side of things of like I started by like coding, but then I realized like coding is fun and I can do it. But it's like what I really enjoy is like design and creative side of things, right? And I moved like I really wanted to understand marketing because I marketing and sales because I thought that was super important for entrepreneurship, which it is, right? Like you have to sell what you build. So those are two elements, and then through that, I was like got really interested in fashion and men's fashion and like how can men look great, feel great, project themselves to the world. And one of the big trends that was happening, and this was around 2016, 2017, was like men's jewelry was like a thing, right? Like, and it's like what I mean by that, of course, like we're Tamil and like we grow up, you see all these movies and like people wear jewelry. Like I've grown up wearing a silver gold chain, right? And it's like, but it's like in the Western world, jewelry for men was seen as gaudy, right? It was seen as like not fashionable until like very recently. Now it's like, yo, like you want to accessorize up, right? So I would say we were at this inflection of like realizing we wanted it and we wanted to create a men's fashion brand that was accessible, affordable to like just like people like us. Like, I mean, and this was like through kind of the college that I joined, right, to do my bachelor's program. And it was it was a school project where we did like a fashion brand. It was joggers. We sold joggers for charity. And then I was like, wait, it's so easy to like sell products. So like let's create like men's jewelry that we then sell. So we raised a Kickstarter. The idea was we were building the jewelry in Jaipur using handcrafted artisans. And then bringing the materials and products here and then selling it through Shopify. And then we raised the Kickstarter to do that. That was successful to get that launched off. And we did pretty much like I think it was like two seasonal drops. And then at some point we were just like, yeah, it's cool. Like we did this. Our goal isn't to build like, I mean, it could have been, right? But it wasn't like, oh, let's build the next big jewelry company. It was just a matter of like, yo, this is sick. Like, let's do it. It's fun. And then it's a great experience. I learned a lot. And then after about a year and a half, we closed it down there. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that mentality of like you got what you needed out of it. It sounds like something you have to kind of just build for the sake of building because you did it. So that kind of now goes back to TKS in terms of, you know, I guess number one, like maybe tell people a bit about it, but like how did the opportunity come, like how did that opportunity to kind of lead the New York chapter come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was living in New York, working remotely, at a startup as their head of product. It was a fintech real estate tech startup, there, and I was living in New York. And at that point, it was like post COVID, right? Like it was like 2022 time frame, right? And I was like in 2023, and coming into 2023, I was like the startup was going well. And it was about a year and a half, 2 years in, and I was like, okay, what's like next for me, right? Like, what do I do next, and where do I want to see myself? And that's when Armbum was picking up, right? Like, started Armbum 2 years ago, so around that same time frame, and we were starting to do that, and I had this vision for Arambum, and it's like everything's coming true in some regard, and like we're able to see it. Of course, it's evolved way beyond my imagination in very good ways, and A lot of things are happening that I'm really excited by, and the team is really excited by. But point being, it's we were like, hey, like I want to do more of Armbum. So it was also a combination of like two, like one, it was like I was in New York. I want to do something not remote, local in New York here. And that's something that I found like powerful and meaningful, right? In terms of like something that I saw as like in tech and science oriented around the New York environment, but also in the flip of it, what wanted like flexibility and time to do build Aramba to where it is now. And so a combination of that was this TKS opportunity, which it came about where I wasn't like applying for the role. It was like a friend of mine knew the founders of TKS, which was founded in Toronto about 7.5 or 8 years ago. These two founders that started it as means to build an accelerator for unicorn teenagers. And the premise was, hey, we need to solve the biggest problems in the world. We want to train people to do it. The best place to start is when they're teenagers, because that's when they're most excited and they're also have the maturity to start building things, but also like college is a bit too intense and a bit too late to start that, especially in the Western world. And so we're going to create this like accelerator program that's outside of school to really coach them on the latest new tech and sciences. And so my friend was connected with the founder, and they were trying to start their first in-person programs in America. And so they were looking at New York and Seattle. So we have a few in-person programs through TKS in Canada, but they were looking to expand because they had a virtual program. They had a lot of students enrolling from America. And so they looked at New York and Seattle, and he connected me to the group chat, actually, funny enough, for Seattle. So he was like, oh, Hari's in Seattle. He did this like crazy things in Seattle, like with the education. Like he probably knows a thing or two. Like you guys should talk. And then I jumped on this call with the founder, and I was like, yeah, here's what I think about Seattle and the way you should approach things in Seattle. And then I was like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm in New York. And he was like, oh, well, we're trying to build a program in New York. And I was like, yeah, cool. Like, let me know. Like, and he came into town and we met. And he was like, yo, like we're actually looking for someone to build and run the New York program. And then I started to learn more about TKS, and really it was from a premise of this is what I tell everyone. It's like why I do TKS is I wish I had this program when I was in high school, right? Like I think I definitely did things. We talk a lot about unconventional outcomes and unconventional paths for these students. And I definitely did follow an unconventional path and had unconventional outcomes. And I had these mentors who helped me through J&J, my parents, others, right? Who really kind of pushed me. But I really, really think about that. If I had TKS, I might like I'm happy where I'm at, but like I might have done way more because it would have been way more of a cool structure to be an entrepreneur, to be a founder, really push myself. And as I think about it, it's like the reason I joined was like, oh, I want to build what I wish I had and what I wish I knew when I was that age. And I joined summer of 2023 to build out the program. We had our first cohort go through, it's a 10-month program, first cohort go from September to June of this year. We had some awesome outcomes from those students. And then we just had the second cohort start, which I'm still running as well now.
I mean, I don't know if you can, are there
Yeah.
any particular students without saying their names that
Yeah.
you feel like, could be doing some, it's like going back and looking at, you're like a sports fan. It's like when I look back
Yeah.
at like some of these videos from like these camps, when you see like all these all-stars that are like playing together as kids and like, oh wow, like they were all in the same camp. So
Yeah.
are there people that you see that could be like, I don't want to use
Yeah.
the name all the time, but
Absolutely.
like Elon Musk or like somebody of like that, like these great inventors
Yeah.
or minds that can do amazing things?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
that's very much what it is. The sports analogy is like exactly what we use. So we see ourselves as Olympic level training for the future leaders, entrepreneurs, founders, inventors of the world, right? That are solving some of the biggest problems in the world. So if you think about it, like there's robotics clubs and science clubs and all these things, and those are great, right? They're very hands-on, very oriented, versus think of us as like not those and more of like an intensive program where it's like it's not a fit for most students. Like a lot of students, some students apply, some students just do the program, don't do the extra projects and other things. But there's students that do, that really embrace it, that really come out with these awesome outcomes, right? And so like I have to explain what the process is for it to make sense what these students' outcomes have been. So essentially every week we will cover essentially a new tech or science topic. So it'll be things from AI, brain computer interfaces, to quantum computing, to synthetic biology, to last week was BCIs, the week before was longevity. We're going to be doing things around material science or batteries and other things, right? So every week is a new topic, but it's not like, and we meet every single week for 3 hours. But those 3 hour sessions that we host on the weekends with these students, they're not lectures. They're actually like we have curriculum built out about all the topics outside that the students consume outside of the program, like outside of the sessions, that through our like educational platform. And then they come into the session ready to build. And so, for example, with the AI session, the students learn about AI beforehand, and then they came in the session and actually used AI to build things. So we used AI to build a short film. We used AI to build their own computer vision model. That is exactly what self-driving cars do. And then they used AI to build video games, right? Using it to like code for you, right? And so like this is probably the first time that students aren't using AI and ChatGPT to ask it to do their homework, right? It's like, yo, you could use AI to build real things that would have been harder before without AI. And so that's an example of like you're using it to build things. Or it's like in the synthetic biology example, we had the students actually use these tools called Benchling and AlphaFold, which are the industry standard for synthetic biologists and gene editing engineers to actually implement experiments and research in like new forms of drug discovery or new mutations for species and different things. This is the tools they use. And so we had tutorials around that and how to use those tools, right? And so these students learn how to build. So outside of all of this, where the real value is the students then actually work on what's called focus projects. So essentially think of that as like a capstone project that the students work on that is of their own choosing. It could be in any of these tech or science areas, and they build projects and they create articles and content and do outreach and meet with experts and founders working in that space to then essentially become experts in these spaces. And then coming out of that, and what the end goal of that capstone project is for them to create their own either innovation or invention that solves a real problem in that space, right? And then that idea then becomes further research or internships or jobs, or even really it becomes startups that they could start because it's like a real idea that they could build that would solve a real problem in the world. And that's where the real outcomes come from. So we've had students, so a few examples of my students from last year. I had virtual students and I had in-person New York students. So one of my virtual students, he was super interested in self-driving cars and building AI for them. He built a bunch of projects in that. Now he's 16 years old and he's going to be working at the equivalent of NASA in Germany. He's a German student, and their self-driving car division as an AI engineer. I have another student who's super interested in nuclear fusion, and she's based in Turkey. She went to the EPFL, which is Switzerland's nuclear reactor facilities, to do research because she was looking at specifically, I believe, is like heat management and phase management for the materials in a tokamak reactor, which is like a nuclear reactor. And so she was doing research and she went and job shadowed, which then led to her getting an internship and research opportunity at MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, which is like a graduate level research lab. Like it's PhDs and graduates working there. And she's working there now and she's 16, which is crazy because one of the things she told me when I first met her was she wants to go to MIT or a school like that for undergrad, but now she's working at a PhD lab there, right? Which is incredible. And then, so these are some of my international students, right? In New York, we had students, one student super interested in BCIs, using BCIs to restore vision. So she's working on a startup and research on that. I had another student working in AI with protein folding and misfolding for better drug discovery. And he's working at Mount Sinai's Cancer Research Center. Now, again, that one he hustled into, like he was reaching out to the department lead for that. The guy never replied to him. So he lived like, I think 15 minutes away from this office. So he literally showed up at the door, knocked on their door and met with the guy and was like, yo, like I need some help. And the guy helped him and then eventually ended up hiring him. And then the last thing, which is like, I think the biggest outcome that I think all these students will achieve in a few years, but one of the students is achieving it right now, is building their own startup, which is what I want all these students to do. So this is what is Meligen Labs, where I'm effectively his advisor on that and helping him with business development and strategy there as well. But essentially, this student, he came to America from Pakistan 3 years ago, spoke no English, now is like running a startup where what he's done is he essentially super interested in space tech and space exploration, came to me being like, hey, I want to be an astronaut. And I was like, yeah, but like it's really hard to become an astronaut. What do you actually want to do? And he was like, well, I want to help humanity reach Mars or other planets. And I was like, yeah, I mean, being an astronaut is one part of the puzzle. Like there's so many other challenges that you can help solve that could help us get there. And one of the big things he found is the biggest problem with space exploration is radiation, right? So essentially, I mean, we experience this on Earth, like UV radiation. That's why we wear sunscreen, because sun's rays can give you like pigmentation and like cause a lot of radiation issues, right? That's the whole thing with nuclear reactors. It's like radiation is bad for you. But like the realization is that Earth actually protects us from some of the most deadliest radiation because of the atmosphere and the magnetic field around Earth, right? But then when you leave Earth, you're exposed, you're outside of the protective shield, and you have to protect us as human beings from radiation because and it's not just humans and organisms, it's also electronics. So electronics get really severely impacted by radiation. So just to talk about the human piece, a astronaut who spends 90 days in space outside of Earth's orbit, after 90 days gets exposed to 13 different types of cancers that they're pretty much, not to say 100, nothing's 100%, but like a significant risk of developing, along with brain issues, along with other issues. And we do have radiation shielding material that is being used, right? Like, so it's aluminum or tungsten or other things that are being used, but they're very ineffective, very expensive, and they decay over time. So their effectiveness decays over time. This is the same thing for electronics. So satellites, right, that go up into space, many of them fail before their life expectancy because the radiation shielding material is just not good enough. So literally the biggest blocker, if you really think about it, is the fact that yes, we can build the most advanced technology, but if we can't protect against radiation, there's no point, because it's just going to get destroyed, or humans will get affected. They're just not able to live long, right? Have a lot of issues. And so to that point, he looked into that and developed his own proprietary composite, hydrogen-based composite, that he is now currently finalizing scientific trials that will be a new age radiation shielding material to replace aluminum that is way lighter, way cheaper, and way more effective with pretty much no decay, that he's now going to start selling to satellite companies and electronics companies and any other space tech companies, even for like spacesuits and things like that. And that will solve a lot of these radiation problems. But then the other piece of the puzzle is that he's also looking at how this can help with commercial use cases on Earth, right? For like people in medical facilities or nuclear facilities or even aviation. Like the higher you are, like if you're in a flight, the higher you're in the atmosphere, less protection, you're exposed to more radiation. So it's like, we should be wearing hats that protect our brains and our bodies that have radiation shielding material. But again, it's not common knowledge, but it's going to be common knowledge in the next, like, I think 5 to 10 years. Here.
How do I write a check?
Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant, but I'm
No.
very excited. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about the students and the outcomes that they've achieved. Here.
I guess my question is, how do I write a check for this guy? Just kidding.
Yeah,
absolutely. The way you broke it down, I was like, damn, that's like a huge problem, because you don't actually think about it. It's like unless you have like a deep-seated kind of industry knowledge, and like I'm like, oh wow, this is a huge problem that, not just for like satellites and like people going up to space, but like you said, if you travel and you're spending lots of times on planes like consultants or other people, you're gonna it's like microplastics. It wasn't a thing like 5 years ago. Now it's like people talk about it all the time.
Yeah, everyone knows, right? Yeah. It's a matter of education. And it's like the industry and the status quo doesn't want you to know.
Yeah,
right. Because then it puts the onus on the airline companies and the airplane manufacturers to protect, because it's like they don't want people to know. And I don't mean it in a bad way. It's like, there's a thing where it's like there's some statistics, and again, it needs to be backed up more, but it's like flight attendants, female flight attendants have like some, I forget the exact number, but it's like an increase in breast cancer, right? If you're a female flight attendant, just because you're like your literal work is you're literally about to leave the atmosphere. It's kind of crazy, right? Like it's like you're just so far up there, you know? Yeah.
That's amazing. I guess like you're getting like a front row seat to like I think of the Thiel Fellowship, but this is like even like below before they get there because that's like
Yeah.
encourage them not to go to like college or university, but this is like, at the high
This
school
is
level.
helping them build because
Yeah.
all these students, right? Like the reason we say unicorn teenagers is they're not happy with their school, right? Their school is not giving them enough, and it's like nothing against school. I mean, school is built in a way that's meant to help everybody, which is good. But there's a select few who want to push themselves, who are willing to push themselves, that should want more, and we want to provide that more. I mean, the goal would be in the long term, like, can TKS's model go for all students? But it's not like that's not where we're at right now. Where we're at right now is like the students who want to push themselves to start doing real things. Like we want to help you do that right now.
I think a lot would have to happen to kind of eradicate or radically change the existing schooling model. So you're gonna always have like a TKS or like Elon Musk had a school, and there's gonna be others like I'm not a fan of the current education system. So
Yeah,
like when you told me about TKS, I was like, oh, like maybe something for me to explore for my kids. It sounds
yeah,
amazing. Now we'll kind of delve into kind of, we talked a lot about the TKS side, which I'm
yeah,
personally
for
interested
sure.
in. But
Yeah,
now let's talk about what you built with Arambam, which is like
yeah,
this media platform for like you said, next generation of like Tamils, a third space for them. So
yeah,
what was kind of, I guess I have an idea, now that I kind of know a bit about, your upbringing, but
yeah,
talk about what sparked the idea for it and like, what are you hoping to do with it? Like you've done some amazing, events
yeah,
with people like Yanchan and like others that have, been following on like your social media. You did
absolutely.
like, the first Tamil week in the US. Like you're doing these amazing events. So tell me
Yeah.
what started it and like where do you want to go with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like the truth of the matter is like growing up, like again, grew up very Tamil, and embedded with the culture, but we didn't have like the outlets as youth, right, to express that, to find community, find connection there, right? And I think like growing up, it was like we couldn't even say we were Tamil because nobody knew what that meant, right? And I think now you can say that, and it's just like people know, right? Which is great, which is part of exactly what we're doing and why we want to do, because we want more people to know what that means, right? And what that is and what that culture means. So like I think so I've written a manifesto about why I started Armbum. It's on the Armbum website. We're actually building a brand new website that's going to be out the next probably few weeks here. So that it'll be more front and center there and people can access it. But again, the reason for the manifesto is to kind of really give a reasoning and meaning behind why we're doing RM, which I think is important because we've had a lot of backlash, right? Like with RM, what we're doing with RM. And it's not from the Tamil community. The Tamil community embraces it, but it's like from other people who are like, why do you need a space like this? And it's not like from a perspective of like, oh, it's bad. It's just like, why is this needed? But I think maybe people don't realize why it is needed, right? Which is the reason for the manifesto. But again, to kind of give you guys the TLDR of what, like, so if you think about like the philosophical reasoning, right, is if you think about humanity, we have three spaces that we mostly interact in as humans, right? So you have the first space, which is considered your home, like your family. You spend most of your time there either alone with a family, whatever it may be. Your second space is where you do your professional work, right? Like, so your job, what do you do? Like in the world we live in today, it's not meant to be physical spaces. It's meant to be like the metaphysical, like what you think about when you're at work, right? Like all of us work from home, right? Many of us. But then the third space is meant to be where you socialize, where you feel community, where you experience culture. What is the culture? And that's where it's like you can have a lot of third spaces, right? So, for example, like from an athletic perspective, sports is a third space. Like playing soccer is a third space. Like I go there when I lived in Seattle for a bit. Like my friend would arrange soccer every week, and that's a third space, right? So it's like third space can be anything, right? It can even be religion. Religion is a third space. Like you go to the church, you go to the temple, whatever it may be, right? So in that regard, like what is third space? And that's like Tamil, right? Like Tamil culture and community. What is the third space? So growing up, third spaces for the Tamil culture for us meant that it was like all these awesome Tamil sangams, and like in America it's called FETNA, which is like the kind of the national organization, is my understanding. And that was like the third space, right? And it's like these cultural communities that were created by our parents' generation for what they saw as culture and community, right? And it's awesome because again, growing up as their children, we got to experience parts of that culture that again we don't because we live in America. Like my dad would tell me about, oh, you can go to like the different Deepavali functions or like even the temple functions. And it's like way different in Tamil Nadu in India, right? Like that's where my parents grew up, but it's like you don't get to experience that here, right? But we do kind of see a taste of Pongal festivals and like the Diwali festivals here through the Tamil Sangam. So it was great. But then it's like once I grew up and like went to college, like working, right, living independently, and like now then living in Boston, living in Seattle, or sorry, living in SF, and then now in New York is then it's like, but I don't end up going to like let's say the Tamil Sangam because I don't think there is a Tamil Sangam in New York, but it's also like hey, I want to hang out with like my friends and do different things. Like honestly, like go to bars, go out. It's like house parties. It's like different things, right? And it's like different ways we socialize and different ways we experience community and culture. And so then the premise then becomes, right? It's like what does for the next generation, so third culture, Tamil, American, or just Western kids, right? What does the third space look like? And I think again, Tamil Sangam and Fitness do an amazing job of fostering that for again people who like are like parent generation or people who come from like the Eastern world, if you want to think about South Asia and then come here, right? But it's like what I think about now is like what does it look like for us, right? And it's like, yeah, we go out like on a Friday night. We're going out to like in New York, we're going out to Lower East Side where there's the bars and like clubs and stuff. And it's like we would be going to like Bollywood parties and other things or Desi parties. But then the piece of the puzzle there is that many of them and most of them actually don't play any Tamil music, right? And don't let us experience Tamil dance or Tamil music and stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, so like, yes, there are now third spaces that like are true to the way we socialize, the way we interact, but also it's not representative of the culture that I grew up in, the culture that I find most familiar, the culture that I want to be experiencing and enjoying and celebrating, right? And then so then it was like, okay, so then can Arambam, the goal of Arambam was always, can we be the next generation third space for the Tamil community to give them experiences, to give them environments, because it's not a permanent thing. It's like we throw events every like few months, right? And like big, ideally it's big ones. And we'd also do small things like workshops and hangouts and things, right? But it's like meant to be like, can we be that for the community there, right? And give that sense. And so it was also, so where it started was literally hosted a what I called a Tamil meetup, rented a bar, and the premise was we're only gonna play Tamil music all night long. You don't have to be Tamil to come. Everybody should come because you can experience the culture, experience community. But it's like we're only gonna play Tamil music. And I expected, yeah, I had a lot of friends, right? Just being like hosting. I would host like a lot of house parties and pre games and things. So friends would come through, and I made a lot of friends through friends. And so I was expecting, yeah, 50, 100 people maybe come out. About 400 people came out to our first event. I mean, it was a free event, but like still so many people came out, which was just like amazing. Right. And the best part was a lot of them were Tamil, a lot of Telugu people, a lot of Mallu people, but a lot of in some regard, for lack of a better term, South Indian people, and a lot of non-brown people as well. And they were like, what is Tamil? They want to come experience it. And they heard Tamil music for the first time, which is just like absolutely incredible. Right. And then that then evolved into just hosting more of those that then led to like hosting some big events. Like our biggest event last year was about 1,200 people there, right? That showed up. And that was a bit too chaotic. It was like after that we realized, okay, we need to charge a little bit of a cover to just make sure we guarantee entrance and like get proper DJs, get a proper environment, get a proper club and things for these like Tamil meetups that have evolved into like live music concerts and like kind of clubbing nights here. But the idea was always, hey, can we be the third space to provide a space for this culture in our community that we haven't had. And literally we're the first people to host Tamil events in New York, and we had the privilege to be the first people to host like true just Tamil like music nights and things in like cities like San Francisco and Dallas and Atlanta and Chicago at this point there.
what was the reaction to like people and experiencing, some of these events? Like, for me, one of the reference points was Yanchan because I interviewed him and also just obviously
Yeah,
being a big fan of his music as well. So like, his events like in like San Fran, I think he did one in New York and
yeah,
maybe he has another one coming up in Dallas, I think. So
yeah, yeah,
like what was your firsthand kind of like feedback from like the audience as you're kind of at the events of,
yeah.
experience like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I gotta say, Janssen, he's a magician, right? He's doing some super cool stuff and he's up to some super cool stuff. So it's very privileged to have had the opportunity to work with him. Their team, his manager reached out to set up this New York event that we hosted at the end of June, and then we ran his SF event the following month, and then now we're doing kind of his last show in North America in Dallas next week, next Friday actually here. So it's he's amazing, right? And so like actually before I can talk about him, I really have to kind of stem from kind of how it's evolved, right? Like we started with just DJs and clubbing nights, and that was also just like, hey, we're renting some of the nicest venues with the best sound systems in New York City where you would go and just party and listen to the top 40s and like Drake's and Kanye West's and Travis Scott music, like those musics of the world, right? Hip hop, pop, rap. And now we're renting that and playing blasting Tamil music. Tamil music that's like old like 80s 90s songs to 2000 songs to the latest songs, like and it's not just movie songs, it's also Tamil independent artists, right? So that's the first step, right? That was like for people it's like kind of like a goosebumps moment, right? It's like, yo, like we've heard Drake, we've heard Kanye West, we've heard Snoop Dogg and all these people on these sound systems, and now we get to hear music that we grew up with, right? And that's like the first step.
Money can be hard to come by, but here is a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
The next evolution after that was we started working with independent artists, right? And so that first was an October event last year where we brought in local New York artists, Tamil artists, to perform their music for the first time. Tamil music for the first time. Some of them were covers, some of them were their own creation originals. And the crazy thing is, all of them have performed in New York before, but never any Tamil music. Right? They've all performed, but they're all Tamil. And so this is the first time they ever performed Tamil music in some regard. And they were like, it was absolutely incredible because the reaction they get making music that's authentic to them is just like feels so much better, right? In the sense of like, yo, this is the music I started creating. And then they evolved into other types of music because that's what their audiences want to listen to. But now they have an audience that's willing to embrace the music that they grew up creating or grew up wanting to create, right, in some regard. And so that was one piece. And then kind of that all culminated in working with Sahi Shiva, right? And then, of course, through him, Vidush and Superveen, and we did his first like stop in his insane world tour that he's doing around the world, where he's literally hitting every continent except Antarctica at this point, right? And he's performing there, right? And it's like incredible because he is performing and creating music that's like reaching Tamil people and non-Tamil people around the world. So we had the privilege of being his first stop in his world tour in New York City. That was like a jam-packed, again, in one of the top nightclubs in New York City, where he performed. And so that was like independent music, not just movie music, but independent Tamil music is here. And that is amazing because then it's like you get to start to see like people's creations and creative, where it's like movies are a lot like doing a lot of creative stuff, but it moves at a way slower evolution versus like independent music is just like it can be anything. And so we get to experience that. And then I think where Janssen comes in now is he is at the intersection, right? Like what his magic is he mixes, produces, brings out classical, authentic Tamil sounds and music into the regular sound space. And what I mean by that, he's mixing, for example, he did this like custom New York mix, right? So it was New York Nagaram, like the Surya song with Empire State. So like literally you go to any club in New York City, you listen to Empire State. Like that's just a song they play, It's just like classic. Everyone sings along to it. So he played that, and then he mixed that with New York Nagaram, which, like, if you think about it, that's what authentically Tamil people potentially think of New York as. And that environment is so, and it's also a boiler room set where he's like literally in the middle of the crowd with everyone, where it's like they see him making the songs live. Right. And so they see the art, the magic that goes into it. It's not just like created once and you just play a track, right? He's like literally creating it live, playing mridangam and things. And so people experiencing that was incredible because that room, of course, had a bunch of Tamil people who saw Tamil music played and mixed, again, in a dope live music venue in a new way, but also people who weren't Tamil get to experience the music in a new way because, hey, they listen to songs they're familiar with. So like Empire State, Drake music, Feed, like all these like popular songs that are then mixed with Tamil music so they can experience that Tamil music in how hype they feel, like what they feel when they listen to like a Jay-Z song or a Drake song there. And I think that combination of what Yanchan's doing is incredible. And I think that's what people walked away with, right? It's like Tamil people walked away with, wow, our music can be as hype, right? And it's as amazing as like all these regular like top 100 songs, right? But also the people who never experienced Tamil music is, Tamil music is mad hype and everyone's just going crazy for it there. So that was a long-winded answer to say it's like my big piece of the puzzle that I think about is like, how do we start the Tamil, not just Renaissance moment, but how do we have a global Tamil moment? And what I mean is like Latin has had its moment. Afro has had its moment, right? Even like dance hall and drill and other things are going global. Tamil can and will go global. And it's like people like Yanchan and Sahi Shiva, even people like Prit and stuff who are taking Tamil global here.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now, if you had a chance to kind of talk to your 16-year-old self, this is like more reflective, I guess.
Ooh.
What would you tell him?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get to talk to 16-year-olds every single day. So I reflect on that all the time here through TKS and coach them, right? And I think a piece of the puzzle that I tell the students and I would tell myself for sure is that just do things. Stop thinking so much, stop planning, just start doing things. Because I feel like most of my ideas have come true. Either I've implemented them or somebody else has implemented them. Of course, like not all my ideas. Some of my ideas are absolutely crazy and stupid and like chaotic, but like a lot of my ideas have come true. Ideas that I was like, I need to pursue, right? Like ideas that I was like, this is going to be a reality in the world. And I think like I just didn't execute on those ideas as much. I just didn't do. I was too indecisive, either too like thinking about it. And I think after seeing enough times where it's like I felt like ideas I had came true and were successful, I was like, at this point, no frills, just execute, like just execute on all these crazy creative ideas I have.
Yeah, I think somebody I was talking to said one of the indicators I see in successful people is how fast they go from learning new information to executing on it. That's like that time window is usually kind of the indicator of how successful people are. So some people just immediately hear something, they're like, oh, I got to do that right now. And within an hour or something, they're doing something.
Right. Like I don't have time to waste. That's also the other thing. It's like, you don't have time to waste, right? Like I'm like, when I started this like entrepreneurship journey, I was like 15, right? 15, 16. I am now 27. And it's like, I'm happy where I am. I'm really happy. I have like amazing family and friends that I love and support, that support me, and I support them, and I care for them. They care for me. I feel like I've done well professionally, and I want to continue to do well, but it's like, who knows? If I'd done more when I was younger, who knows where I would have been? But again, you can't think about the past. It's like all about right now, which is everything that we're doing here.
So I guess now looking forward in terms of your personal legacy, in a few sentences, like how would you want to be remembered by your friends and family?
Yeah, for sure. I think I would want to be known as someone who just like, actually, sorry, let me think about this in a few different ways. I say this, and I say this to everyone, and like anybody on the RMM team that had the opportunity, have had the privilege of working with, right? It's like, we are unstructured chaos. Or sorry, we're structured chaos. Like the whole goal of everything is just like, we just need to do dope shit and just like keep doing dope shit. It doesn't matter what it is, but just like as long as it's dope and as long as it's like really community oriented and like or pushing it forward. Let's keep doing it, which creates a pretty chaotic environment because it's not very, I mean, unfortunately, not very methodical. Like, it's not like, hey, we have like you said, it's not like I have a plan for the next 6 months. Like, we are starting to get into that place because there's just more that we're doing, and we know, like, for example, we're gonna do not. I don't want to drop it right now. Like, I don't want to. It's not me. I would drop it right now if it was just me, but like, it's another individual we're working with, so I don't want to drop it on his behalf. But like, we're gonna plan another U.S. tour for another dope artist that I'm excited to bring to like work with and like do right. And it's like cool, like, yo, now we know that, but it's also just like unstructured, it's structured chaos, right? Where it's like, hey, we just need to be moving, like that's the thing. And so to that point, what that translates to personal legacy is just like, yo, I built insane things that were like crazy, that like literally people were like, yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be true. Like, there were so many people who were like, yo, I don't know if there's like enough Tamil people to embrace something like Arambam or do something like Arambam, right? Tamil people and non-Tamil people. And I mean, and but as I say that, like, it's not all about like the haters, right? It's like not to say they were haters, sorry. I don't mean to say that as much as it's like there was a lot of people who supported it and loved it, right? And that's why we do what we do, because of the people who are there. But it's also like, yo, like, I just had some insane ideas that everyone thought was crazy, and like I figured out a way to pull them off. And if I can be that person, that would be amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue into the final part of the podcast, which is
Yeah.
a fun speed run, like I like to call creator confessions. So
Yeah.
basically, I'm going to say a bunch of statements, and you're going to tell me the first thing that pops to mind. Ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite Tamil food?
Oh, my mom's chicken biryani. But
Something
I don't know
that's
if that counts as Tamil though, per se.
yeah,
I'll
I know
say
it's not
dosa and
formally,
sambar.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll say dosa and sambar. Dosa and sambar.
something that scares you,
All this hate and lack of acceptance of diversity and culture.
an insecurity that you have.
Like, mm, like I wake up doubting what I'm doing, right? Like, I wake up sometimes and it's just like, yo, am I on the right track? Like, am I doing the best? Like, I feel like it's not enough there. Maybe it's imposter syndrome, but it's not imposter syndrome as much as it's a lack of like feeling accomplishment there. That counts as an insecurity.
Favorite show that you're watching?
Ooh, of all time, we're watching right now.
It could be of all time. It could be something you're currently watching.
Okay. Just happens to be that like both are lawyer TV shows. I love Suits.
Oh,
That's my favorite show of all time. Like, great show. Everyone loves that. It had a resurgence because of Netflix, so kudos to them.
yes.
But the recent one that I really got into that has that flair to it is Lincoln Lawyer. Has like
Oh
Suits.
man, it's so funny. I love both those shows.
Yeah.
The first
But yeah.
15 minutes of Suits got me hooked into. I ended up watching the full 8 seasons because of that 15 minutes that I thought I was
Yo,
gonna just watch one episode.
yo, but here's the thing. I watched it live. So I had to wait every season,
Yeah.
Like, I had to wait. But like, another show that I really love that's on that wavelength is White Collar. Have you
I
seen White
haven't
Collar?
seen that. No, I've
It's on
seen Lincoln
Netflix
Lawyer. I'm a
too.
big fan of Lincoln Lawyer, but yeah.
If you love Suits, if you love Lincoln Lawyer, White Collar, amazing. Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
A place you're itching to travel to.
Place I'm itching to travel to. I want to spend more time in Toronto and London. I've made so many friends and just so many people that I've met through this process of Arambam, and it's amazing stuff and amazing communities and amazing like just experiences that are getting created in Toronto and London that I haven't had the opportunity to go to yet.
A fellow Tamil creator that you want to give a shout out to.
Ooh, ooh, so many. I mean, I want to go to so many, right? Of course, I'm trying to think. Anybody you like abundantly unique that I've recently connected with. Again, so many people. I mean, like, okay, I just want to call out all the Tamil creators, if I can, in like America, right? Because they have, especially the musical creators, and of course all the other creators too, like dance, art, other things. But like, there's so much talent and there's so much skill that they have, and it's like, I think it's time for our communities and our culture here to start to embrace more of what they're doing authentically that's true to them. So like, they are just like grinding away, and it's like, I'm excited for the next year, 2 years for them to come out. There's one guy who's a friend of like a close family friend of my girlfriend, who like I'm excited for him. His name is Kishon. He's very much on the underground right now in the terms of just like he's in the weeds creating his music. And I've seen his stuff and it's going to be absolutely brilliant. And he's getting to a place where he feels like everything's ready to release and he's going to release it and it's going to take the world by storm. And I'm excited when he does. Everyone will see the magic that is Kishon, and I'm excited. And of course, all these other artists that we're now working with through Arambum, based here in America, and of course internationally too. Like everybody's up to some really interesting stuff. So excited.
You heard it here first. A favorite childhood memory.
Favorite childhood memory is I was playing cricket on my dad's adult league. And it was just like whatever. The adult league meeting was like recreational. And they were on teams or whatever. It's like it's so gimmicky. Now it's like legit in America now because there's a US American team, like cricket team. But like point being, it was like I would always show up. They would never let me play because I was a kid, right? Like because I was small, I was a kid. But then they ran out of players, and so they made me play like well, I forget the terms. I was playing legs on the leg side next to the wicket there. And like these guys didn't like they saw me there when I was a kid, right? And then one of the uncles, or I mean uncle at that point, right? Must have been a young guy, must be my age, who knows, right? Like he was like batting and I was in fielding, and he hit the ball once to me, and I like wasn't reacting in time, so I missed it. And then like he got like 2 or 3 runs. And so I think he thought he could test me again. And in my mind, if like somebody tests me or says no, it's like, yo, I'm gonna like take this as a challenge. Like I'll figure it out. And then he hit it to me again. And then I caught him out. And I was like, and then they didn't expect that, right? Like they were like shocked that I did that. And then another time, another batter tested me, and I got like on a run out. Like I got the ball and I hit him on a run out. Again, I don't think they expected me, and I was like maybe in middle school, but it's like those formative moments of like just sports was a big part of my life, and it's just like I remember that distinctively there.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie of all time? It can be Tamil, English, or both.
Yeah. It's definitely a Tamil movie. I'm between two, but I have to go with Rajinikanth's movie. It's definitely Padiyappa. Like Padiyappa, goated movie, goated soundtrack. It's just like, yeah. And him, and it's like, it's not even just him, right? It's not even just him. It's like the heroine is great. Like she really fits the role and does what she does best. But Neelambari, so Ramya Krishna Madam is like, yo, she absolutely killed it. Like the villain, I think the hero is of course amazing, but a villain makes the movie is interesting, and she made the movie interesting.
I got to say Basha. And then there's other ones, like the Any
Yeah,
Money Rent movie, like Kanat
of course.
Mutta.
Yeah,
Autograph was a surprising movie that I liked.
yeah,
Indian classic, like
of course.
but no, it's a good choice.
Basha, I would say too, but I just feel like it was taken
Everyone would
so
say probably say
long.
Basha.
Yeah, but like Basha, but it was like my problem with Basha is it was like I think it was like an early 80s movie. So the picture quality, the video quality is just
Nice.
not good.
Yeah,
Which like Padiyappa was like kind of this first Rajini's new age movie where it's like, yo, like this digital camera that they're using. And so like the movie is just like it just looks so real, versus Basha has some like it feels so fake,
agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's a purchase you've made or splurged on in like the last couple of years that you have no regret about?
Oh, I always end up. I don't think this counts, and I have a different answer. But it's like, if it were just like my most expensive purchases have always been like my laptop or phone, right? Like just like in general, like it's just technology because I work in tech. Even Arambum, like honestly, is a tech company. I don't think people realize that. It's just like we produce so much content, we're using so much tech, we're using so much AI, right? So it's like I need the latest tech. And having the like every year tech improves. And if you're not like getting it's like it sucks, but if you're not getting the latest laptop every year, you're missing out on so much improved productivity that you could have. But then I would say like in most recent time, it's like these new productivity software that I've like downloaded. I think it's just like leveled up my life in so many significant ways. Where the recent one is called Whisper Flow, where it's like probably the best voice to text software I've ever used. And the reason I say that is like we think we think faster than we type. And then if typing is part of the process of things we do, like we're as slow as our weakest link in the process. And it's like typing is just so slow versus we think way faster. And so like we haven't figured out telekinesis yet. So until then, we have our voices. And so we need to use voice to interact with our technology because it'll be way faster than like even mouses and touchscreen and all those things. So I think that's where it's like that's been a big level up for me. Here.
What's a pet peeve of yours?
Ooh, I think I just saying on the technology note, I'm very annoyed when people can't like don't use technology in the most efficient way possible. And what I mean by that is like they probably do something that like takes a few extra steps or takes longer to do. And it's like it's so funny because like it probably the amount of time that it would take to learn it and the amount of time that you would take you to save that it saves you by learning the right way to do things. If you did that, you would like get so much time back, right? But then people are like, oh, I don't want to spend the time to learn how to do something properly and then continue to just spend their life wasting time there.
If you knew
Yeah.
that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
Um, so I love music. I grew up making music or like singing music. I want to make music, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, just given everything that's going on. But that's why it's like I see Arambum's important mission, which is a personal mission, is like helping artists make music and create, and just like any creators help create, especially Tamil creators here in the country. I want to help them do that, and that's a big next vision for what we're doing next year with Arambum, and more on that soon. But um I would love to be part of like end to end creating music because I think music outlasts humans, and I would love for that to something I create in that regard stay beyond.
What's a book you read or a podcast you've listened to that's had an impact on you, maybe recently?
Yeah, I really like My First Million.
That's my
It's
favorite podcast. Yeah.
uh,
That's my favorite podcast. So
yeah. My First Million, really awesome. That's the recent days. They're doing a great job. It's really relevant, really new. The OG one that I still like, probably formative knowledge, formative thoughts, first ever podcast was Tim Ferriss. Like I think he set the stage for honestly, he defined, right? Like he defined any podcast we have today. So he is the mastermind. Of course, he doesn't. I mean, what he does is he still does what he does now, right? He hasn't like adopted like the TikToks and the Instagram reels, but he's still the goat there.
what's a belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life?
I would definitely say it's the Steve Jobs quote that it's like essentially I'm gonna botch it, but it goes to the premise of like your life changes when you realize that the world around you was built by people no different than you, which means that like you like they're no different. They've just done more to learn more to then build the world. So if you want to build the world, you just have to learn what you need to do. It'll take time, it'll be challenging, but you can do it because you're no different than the people. So you realizing you have the ability to create a better world is like critical there.
And finally, what's a piece of advice you'd want to give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there?
Mm. I think be unapologetically Tamil. Like if you're gonna identify as a Tamil creator, just do you, right? Like don't feel like you have to fit in to what the Western world wants or what the mass media wants. Do what you do because I would think you are gonna have way more satisfaction doing what you want to do. And the people that will come that will share love will share it with more passion and more vigor and more actual enjoyment because they authentically connect with what you're doing. So it's like better to be niche than try to be like something for everyone there.
What's the saying? It's like you want to be hot tea, you don't want to be lukewarm tea. So I think it's like
Yeah.
just focus on that. So
Yeah. It's better to be everything for a few people than only like barely anything or barely something for everybody there.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you want to have a few dollars versus a lot of pennies. Or
Yeah.
the analogy with friendship. So yeah, I mean, Howdy, thanks for kind of jumping on. This is very fascinating. You've had a very fascinating kind of career and personal kind of trajectory. I think people
For sure.
listening to this will like really enjoy it. So thanks for jumping on. For somebody listening that's like really inspired by kind of what you've been doing, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I kind of separate out my life in terms of Arambum and my personal stuff, and especially all the Tamil creative stuff that we're doing related to all of that is on Instagram. So you can find me at Hari Mahesh, just spelled HARIMAHESH. Or of course, you could would love for everyone to follow Arambum and please share it with your friends who are Tamil and of course non-Tamil people too, because the goal is to increase exposure amongst non-Tamil people, but on the more professional like professionals TKS side of things in terms of like tech and science, that's all on my LinkedIn and Twitter. So same thing, it's all the tags are the same pretty much. It's just Hari Mahesh across all the different socials there, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for making time. And, for everyone listening, as always, appreciate you guys reaching out with the feedback and kind words. On to the next one.
Absolutely, and thank you for the time and thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.